Hello again. There seems to be a convention among left-wing and progressive people that we should all pretend that there were mighty civilisations and grand cities in West Africa before Europeans came to the Dark Continent, and that racist historians and archaeologists have conspired together to conceal this black heritage. Politeness prevents most people from calling out these fantasies, but good manners and social skills have never really been my forte. And so I thought I would explain how one particular fairy tale has been devised and propagated. By examining this particular case, we can see how the entire false narrative has been constructed. I mean the stories which crop up during Black History Month, the claims that Africans had the first cities in the world with public street lighting, centuries before there was such a thing in Europe. I'm sure viewers have seen this madness, which is now taught in schools, by the way. I came across this book in the library recently called Don't Touch My Hair. This references the persistent claim by some black women that white people are always touching and stroking their hair without permission, something which I have never in my life heard of in reality, but read about a lot as a supposed microaggression. According to a review by a magazine called Hot Press, of which I confess I have never heard, this is the first book from one of Ireland's brightest literary talents. Move over, James Joyce and W.B. Yeats. You have some competition from Emma Dabiri, a Yoruba woman who grew up in Ireland. The book is essentially about black women's hair, but deals with a lot of other topics as well. It says here, a powerful and arrestingly relatable account of the rich history of Afro hair that seamlessly interweaves her personal perspective with meticulously researched historical facts. Well, we'll look at that in a moment. Part memoir, thoroughly researched socio-political analysis, delves into the painful realities and history of follicular racism. Right, okay, it's about black women's hair, and at the same time it pretends that there were advanced civilisations in West Africa before Europeans arrived. Right, I want to read a bit here about the famous city of Benin, of which some of you may have heard. And this piece makes a specific claim. Are you ready? Benin was also one of the first cities in the world to have public street lighting, provided by huge metal lamps fueled by palm oil. The lamps were especially concentrated near the Ober's palace, that's the king, in order to assist traffic to and from the residence after dark. In 1691, the Portuguese... Right, what I want to draw your attention to is that this is a specific claim. Yeah? That it is Benin was one of the first cities in the world to have public street lighting. I want to focus on this one claim, although there are others even madder in the book. This is something which I've seen said elsewhere, and the aim is to show that an African city was prosperous, civilised and grand before Europeans came. It's a specific claim that Benin was actually leading the world in this regard, lighting the streets of their city at night. This is typical of the false claims made in this way, which white liberals repeat uncritically. So where does the idea about street lighting in Benin in the 17th century come from? Well, Emma Dabiri has copied what she says in this book almost word for word from an article published in The Guardian a few years ago. Right, I've read out to you what she says, and now let me read the piece from The Guardian, to which I give a link in the description to this video. Benin City was also one of the first cities to have a semblance of street lighting. Huge metal lamps, many feet high, were built and placed around the city, especially near the king's palace. Fueled by palm oil, their burning wicks were lit at night to provide illumination for traffic to and from the palace. You see how similar that is to the piece that Deberry says. She doesn't give any reference for what she says, nor is it in quotation marks. She simply pinched that little piece from the Guardian's article in 2016, rearranged a few words and hopes that no one will notice. Right. Actually, there are whole chunks of that piece to be found in Deberry's book, but let's focus on the question of this being one of the first cities in the world with public street lighting. Googling Benin and public street lighting throws up a whole host of black history sites which simply repeat word for word what the Guardian article says, but I couldn't at first find any reference to the idea before that, let's say earlier than 2016, which made me suspect that the writer of that article had simply invented what he said. However, Wikipedia gives us a clue to follow. There is a Wikipedia page about street lighting, and in it we find the following statement. The West African Kingdom of Benin, located in what is now southwestern Nigeria, had a system of street lights between the 16th and 19th centuries. It consisted of a series of large bronze lanterns, 4 feet in diameter, mounted on wrought iron poles. The bronze receptacles contained palm oil as a fuel source and a piece of cotton as a wick. They were lit at night and were mostly located around the Royal Palace complex. Now there's a reference to this claim, and it is one which we can all follow up. Note that this is a very specific claim, that in the 16th century this city, built of mud, had public streetlights. The book cited is called Great Benin, Its Customs, Arts and Horrors by a man called Ling Roth, and it was published in London in 1903. Hooray, this is something we can definitely check up on. And as it happens, a digitised version of this book is available online. I give a link to it in the description to this video. Even better, you can search the text by typing in keywords such as street light, light, lamp and so on. Nothing comes up in this way. That is to say, there's no mention of public street lighting, which is not really a surprise. However, on page 120, there is an illustration of a bronze lamp of the kind found in the compounds of the king, and also the places where human sacrifices were undertaken. We read that figure 125, sketch from memory by Mr. C. Punch of a standard lamp used in Benin. He says, I have been struck by the large lamps in the compounds. The receptacles for the oil and wick were about 4 feet in diameter. The stands were of wrought iron. These lamps were only alight on very big occasions. And that is it, even down to the size and the fact they used palm oil. This is the source of what is claimed here about public street lighting, and Benin being one of the first cities in the world to have it. Yes, interweaves her personal perspectives with meticulously researched historical facts. I don't think so. She writes about public street lighting and says that the lamps assisted passage after dark. In reality, these lamps were not in public places at all, but were in special compounds of the king and in the fetish houses, and were only alight on very big occasions. They were in fact ceremonial lanterns which didn't cast all that much light anyway, and were lit during human sacrifices. Most of them were copied from Portuguese designs, by the way. There were no lamps from this culture earlier than the 19th century. This, then, is the source of one piece of nonsense. Had the author of this book been a white man, nobody would have talked about meticulously researched historical facts. They would have berated him for the shoddy copying of rubbish found during a quick Google. But because the author was a black woman, special praise must be heaped upon her. This is patronising and awful, and it tells us a great deal about modern society. Every single aspect of these ancient West African kingdoms that one examines leads to the same thing. It leads to the realisation that they are garbled nonsense, that someone has uncovered something and then exaggerated or plain lied about it. There were no sophisticated cities in West Africa before the coming of the Europeans, and the idea that the Africans had street lighting before Europe, it's absolute bloody nonsense.